If it's XX, it's the female. If it's XY, it's the male. And today's science tells us that it is the male fluid. It is the sperm which is responsible for defining the sex of the child. If the X of the sperm takes part in fertilization, a female is born. If Y takes part, a male is born. This was discovered recently in science, 50 years back, 100 years back. Quran mentions 14 years ago in Surah Najm, chapter 53, verse number 45 and 46, that it is He who has created the human being from a minute quantity of liquid ejaculated from a male and gave it sex, male and female. The Arabic word is nutfa, minute quantity of liquid, and the Arabic word is tumna, ejaculated from a male. And then it got sex as male and female. The Quran repeats the message in Surah Insan, chapter 75, verse number 37 to 39, that we have created the human being from a minute quantity of sperm, nutfatin maniyumna, a minute quantity of sperm. Then we made it into an alaka, then made it into a mudga and gave it sex, male and female. The Quran says the sperm is responsible for the sex of the child, male and female. The country where I come from, India, people normally prefer having sons rather than daughters for reasons known best to them. And many a times, if a lady gives birth to a female child, the mother-in-law will blame the daughter-in-law. Why did you give birth to a female child? Actually, it depends upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whether male is born or female is born. But if the mother-in-law has to blame anyone, she should not blame the daughter-in-law, she should blame the son. Because according to the Quran and according to science, it is the male which is responsible for the sex of the child and not the female. Furthermore, the Quran says in Surah Az-Zumar, chapter 39, verse number 6, that we have created the human beings in the womb of the mother in stages, one after the other, in 3 waves of darkness. Prophet Zakir Naik said, these 3 waves of darkness which the Quran speaks about refers to the anti-abdominal wall, refers to the uterine wall and amniochorionic membrane. At that time, embryology, we did not know in embryology that the child, the embryo, is protected in 3 waves of darkness. Quran mentioned this 14 years ago. Furthermore, Quran speaks about the various embryological stages in great detail. In Surah Aminun, chapter number 23, verse number 12 to 14. Quran says, we have created the human beings from a minute quantity of liquid. Then made it in, and then placed it into a qararim makin, a place of security. Then made it into an alaka, a leech-like substance. Then made the alaka into a mudga, a chewed-like lump. Then made the mudga into izama, bones. Then clothed the izama with lahm, flesh. Glory be to Allah, who's the best to create. These 3 verses of the Quran speaks about the various embryological stages in great detail. It says, we have created the human being from a nutfa, which I told you earlier, means a minute quantity of liquid, then placed it into a qararim makin, a place of security. Today's science tells us that the baby, the embryo, is protected posteriorly from the spinal cord and the posterior muscles, and anteriorly by the anterior abdominal wall, as well as the uterine wall, as well as the amniochorionic membrane. It says, then we made it into an alaka, a leech-like substance. The Arabic word alaka has got 3 meanings. One means a leech-like substance, which we discussed earlier. It also means something which clings, and we know that the embryo clings to the uterine wall. And the third meaning is a congealed clot of blood. Today's science tells us, in the initial stages, the blood does not circulate in the embryo, and it also looks like a congealed clot. So imagine all 3 meanings of alaka, a leech-like substance, something which clings, a congealed clot, all 3, according to science today, is perfect, alhamdulillah. Furthermore, it says, we made the alaka into a mudga, a chewed-like lump. Prophet Zakir Naik took plaster seal and bit it between his teeth to resemble a mudga, a chewed-like lump. And the teeth marks, they resemble the somites, from where the nerves develop in a human being. We made the mudga into izama, that is bones. Then clothed the bones with lahm, that is flesh. Then the Quran says, glory be to Him, who's the best to create. Today science tells us up to this stage, the development in the embryo is the same, whether it be a fish, whether it be rabbit, whether other animals. Only after this stage, it differs. And in a human being, we find head coming out, feet, legs. That's the reason Quran says, then he created a new creature. Glory be to him who's the best to create. Quran says in Surah Hajj chapter 22 verse number 5, that we create the human being from minute quantity of liquid, then made it into an alaka, made the alaka into mudga, partly formed and partly unformed. When Professor Marshall Johnson was told to comment on this verse of the Quran, he said at this stage of the human development, some organs in the human being are formed, some are not formed. Some cells are differentiated, some are undifferentiated. If I call at this stage as a complete creation, the answer is wrong. Because it's not a complete creation. If I say it's an incomplete creation, again the answer is wrong. There is no better description than the description of the Quran, saying it's partly formed and partly unformed. Because some organs are complete, some are incomplete. Some cells are differentiated, some are undifferentiated. And Professor Keith Moore said, the stages given in the Quran of alaka, mudga, izaman, it is based on shapes of the embryo. It is far superior than the stages of modern embryology, where we say stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, where a person can get confused. The stages described in the Quran, based on shapes and figures, is far superior and easier. All these things, what science has discovered recently, 30 years back, 40 years back, 50 years back, 100 years back, was mentioned in the Quran 1400 years ago. Time will not permit me to speak on great detail. I'll just give you two more other scientific facts mentioned in the Quran. Quran says in Surah Qiyamah, chapter number 75, verse number 3 to 4, that when the unbelievers say, how will your Creator be able to reconstruct the bones after a human being has been buried, the bones have been disintegrated, how will he be able to reconstruct the bones on the day of judgment? So the reply is given, tell them, he can not only reconstruct the bones, he can even reconstruct in perfect order the very tips of the finger. What does the Quran mean by saying not only the bones can be reconstructed, but even the very tips of the fingers can be reconstructed? It was in 1880 that Sir Francis Galt, he discovered the fingerprinting method. And he said that no two fingerprints of the human beings are identical even in a million human beings. Even in millions of human beings, the fingerprints they differ. They cannot be identical. And today, the police, the FBI, the CIA, the CID, they use fingerprinting method to identify the criminals, to identify the human beings. Imagine what we discovered in 1880 by Sir Francis Galt. Quran mentioned 1400 years ago that he can not only reconstruct your bones, leave aside the bones, he can even reconstruct the very tips of your finger